Welcome to this week's assembly. Today we're going to think about having God as a friend and also being honest. I've got 5 questions at the start just for you to think about very quickly. Number 1, do you like having friends? 2, how do friends make you feel? 3, what do you do with your friends? How do you spend your time when you're with them? Number 4, do you ever fall out with your friends? And number 5, have you ever hurt your friends? Christians believe that God likes having friends, and that's why he made the first people. Hands up if you could tell me the names of the first people in the Bible. Do you want to shout them out? Correct, Adam and Eve. And God wanted to share the beautiful world that he'd created with Adam and Eve. So he made a special garden for them to live in. Now the Bible tells us that that garden was in modern day Iran, next to Iraq in the Middle East. And God came to talk with them in the garden every day. It was a very happy place. Adam and Eve were peaceful there, they knew joy, and they had everything they needed. There were never any unhappy days. However, God knew that there was something bad called evil. Now, there are many stories and films about good and evil, aren't there? You probably like some of them. The superheroes films come to mind, like Batman or Spider-Man or Iron Man. Any of these Marvel characters. But there are a lot of films about good and evil. Now, God knew that evil would hurt Adam and Eve. It might frighten them, harm them, or spoil their fun. Now, God didn't want that to happen, so he told Adam and Eve that they could eat anything they wanted off any of the trees in the garden except one tree. And this one tree was in the middle of the garden, and it was called the tree of knowledge of good and evil, and they couldn't eat off that tree. One day, when Adam and Eve were separately walking in the garden, a snake wriggled up to Eve. The snake said to her, "Are you really allowed to eat off any of these trees?" "Yes, we can," said Eve, "but there's only one tree we can't eat off, and that is the one in the middle of the garden. And if we eat of that, we will die." And the snake said, "No, you won't die. God doesn't want you to eat off that tree, because if you did, you would be like God, and you would know as much as God. And God doesn't want you to know as much as him. Why don't you try it? Go on. It's lovely. Look at it. It tastes beautiful." Adam looked at the tree. She reached up and she picked the fruit. Now, we don't know what sort of fruit it is. Many people think it was an apple because there's alliteration, Adam's apple. But we don't know. And that's actually a good little trick question you could ask your mum and dad. Say to them tonight when you see them, what fruit did Adam and Eve eat off the tree in the Garden of Eden? They'll probably say apple. And you said, actually, we don't know what it was. Anyway, she picked the fruit, she bit it. Oh, it was delicious. Tasted lovely. And she found Adam and told him all about the fruit and gave him some to eat. He took it and he ate it. And when he bit it, suddenly Adam and Eve realised that they were naked. They hadn't got any clothes on. They didn't know that before. And so they made some clothes like swimming costumes out of leaves in the garden. And do you know what they did then? They hid from God. Now, why do you think they hid from God? I wonder if you've got any ideas. I'm going to tell you in a sec. They hid from God because they knew that they'd done something bad and they felt guilty. They wondered what God would do. Well, later when God arrived in the garden for his walk with Adam and Eve, He couldn't find them. Where are you? God shouted. And when they came out from their hiding place, God said to them, what have you done? And Adam said, it wasn't my fault. She gave me the fruit. She told me to do it. And Eve said, it wasn't my fault. It was the snake. The snake told me to do it. The snake just looked very pleased with himself. Now, a question for you quickly to interrupt the story. What do you do when you know you've done something wrong? What is the best thing to do? What should Adam and Eve have done? The best thing to do when you've done something wrong is to own up and apologise. Well, God felt terribly sad. His children hadn't just broken the one rule, they also broke God's heart. They'd broken their friendship with God. Also, from now on, everything in creation would start to go wrong. From now on, everything would start to decay and die, because wrongdoing, the Bible calls that sin, came into God's perfect world. And since that time, his children have always been hiding from him. And the consequence of them disobeying God and breaking his rules was, always one rule, was that they had to leave the garden. But before they left, God still loved them, and he made clothes for them to wear. And they moved many, 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 many miles away from the Garden of Eden, and they became farmers, and they learned to grow food and to eat it. Well, the story doesn't actually end there, because God had an amazing plan. His plan was that one day he would get his children back, even though he would have to suffer. One day he would make their home perfect again. One day he would wipe away all their tears. There'd be no more sadness, no more pain, no more regret and fear and worry. I often wonder, what would have happened if Adam and Eve had fessed up, been honest, and said, God, I'm sorry I did it, instead of blaming someone else. We don't know, do we, what would have happened? But dishonesty always affects more people than just us. If we can be honest with ourselves about what we've done, it's easier to make it right again. If we can take the blame, apologise, and accept our part in what we've done wrong. That is something to remember from this story of Adam and Eve. So before I say a prayer and we'll have our quiz, just a minute's reflection on this story. How did Adam and Eve knew that they'd done wrong? How did they know they'd done wrong? Think for a minute how they blamed someone else for them doing wrong. So Adam blamed Eve and Eve blamed the snake. Think about how often we do that. How often do we blame someone else? Okay, as a short prayer, if you like my prayer and you agree with it, you can say amen with me at the end. Dear God, help us to be honest when we do something wrong. Help us not to blame other people, but acknowledge our mistakes, to apologise, and so to learn and move on. Thank you that you want to be our friend. Thank you that you will never lead us into harm. Thank you that we can talk to you at any time, knowing that you're always listening. Thank you that you keep your promises and you never give up on us. Amen. Okay, here's our quiz. Question 1. Remember right at the start of the story, I said the reason God created people. Why did God create people? Why did he create Adam and Eve? 2, this is hard. Where was the special garden situated? Which country was it situated? Number 3, what was the one rule God gave to Adam and Eve? There was only one rule. What was it? Number 4, a bit easier. What animal tempted Eve? Number 5, a trick question. What type of fruit did Eve eat? Can you remember? I said a little bit about that. What type of fruit did Eve eat? Number 6, when Adam ate the fruit, him and Eve realised they were naked. What did they do? They did 2 things. So you can remember one of them or even both of them. What was the consequence of Adam and Eve eating the fruit? What happened to them in the garden? Remember. And number 8, what was God's amazing plan? Some of those are easy, some of those are hard. Let's see how well you got on. So, question 1. Why did God create people? Because he wants to be friends with us. He wants us to be his friend, or for friendship. Number 2, the Garden of Eden was situated in Iran, in the Middle East, next to Iraq. So Iran or the Middle East, or if you put Iraq, you could get a point. Number 3, what was the one rule God gave Adam and Eve? Not to eat off the tree in the middle of the garden. That would do. If you really remembered, it's called the tree of the knowledge of good and evil. Number 4, a snake tempted Eve. Trick question number 5, what fruit did Adam and Eve eat? We don't know what fruit it was, so we don't know is the answer. 6, when Adam ate the fruit, what did he and Eve do when they realised they were naked? The 2 things they did, point for either, is they made like a swimming costume with leaves, clothes with leaves, and they hid from God. Number 7, what was the consequence of eating the fruit? They had to leave the garden. So they lost their friendship with God. One of those things would give you a point. And number 8, what was God's amazing plan that we're going to be looking at over the coming weeks? The plan was to make friends with people again, because he'll never give up on us. And God would make the world a perfect place again in the future. Something like that. Well, I hope you've done well with the quiz. It's quite a tricky quiz today, I think. But anyway, great to see you. Always good to see you. And I hope to see you in person very, very soon. Bye. Bye.